Hello everybody, welcome to part 2 of my combat guides for Skyrim. In this video in particular, we're going to be taking a look at movement. This, along with what I covered in the previous video, which was hotkeys, is going to be two of the most important things you can do to improve your fighting in Skyrim. See, a lot of people like to play with mods in this game because they think the combat is impossible, but there are a few tricks that you can use, even when fighting against multiple opponents, to succeed without having to use mods, basically. So yeah, like I mentioned, you're going to be using movements. Ideally, you want to keep your enemies in front of you at all times, and we're going to start off simple by fighting one enemy at first, and then two, and then so on and so on. Since the enemies in Skyrim are computer enemies, they are very predictable. So one of the best things that you can do is consciously try to bait out the enemy's attack. Now, you don't want to just walk in there and be hit by a power attack, right? So you want to bait out the power attack. You want to get right within the range of where the enemy's AI will have the ability to perform a power attack. They will only do this when they get a certain distance away from you, right? But you want to be conscious of this so that you have time to react and move out of the way. The best thing that you can do when fighting is dodge an attack without using your stamina or without blocking, because this is going to cost the enemy's stamina and it's not going to cost you anything. And if you manage to keep yourself just within the range of where you can strike them back, this is even more effective when you do it after a power attack. You can attack them. Now, this is a very simplistic way of looking at it, and we are doing this against one enemy at first, but the better you get at this, the more enemies you will be able to do this against at the same time. Now, I will make a video talking a little bit about health, magicka, and stamina. If you are a warrior, you do not want to put any points into stamina. Ironically enough, health and magicka, you should do about an 80-20 split for health, or maybe 80-70, but health is definitely going to be your most important part. This depends a little bit on the difficulty. However, the thing that a lot of players struggle with is as soon as they get within range of an enemy, that the AI locks you in an instant death animation. Armor rating and health helps with this. However, it's unlikely, unless you're fighting bandit chiefs or something crazy strong in the beginning of the game, that this will happen to you, especially if you put every single point into health. Obviously, when you're fighting your enemy, you have to look at him, but you move the fastest forward, then side to side, and then backwards. So sometimes this is a little bit more advanced. Whenever you get good with your controls, as soon as you see an enemy attack, you may want to do a 180 and then sprint in a certain direction. This is, again, a bit more of an advanced skill, but that's the kind of the idea you want to be thinking of whenever you're fighting, that moving straight backwards is not going to give you as much movement speed. Now, this is something that I've stressed on many of my videos before. I like to use heavy armor because obviously it protects you the most. Early game, light armor is slightly better. Using something like the Dark Brotherhood armor, which you can get for free, using something like scaled armor or any of the Anniversary Edition stuff is very, very good. And this means that you don't have to use the Steed Stone at the same time. If you opt for heavy armor in these clips, I will probably be using some of the Anniversary Edition armor, which is extremely good. You can actually put this on, and I would highly recommend that you use the Steed Stone. If you don't use the Steed Stone and you're moving at a slower speed, fighting multiple enemies is going to be very difficult. Yes, you are protected, but it doesn't matter, especially when you're playing on the higher difficulties, because you cannot out damage or out absorb, I guess, an enemy's damage on the higher difficulties. This is why you have to use movement to your advantage. On legendary, enemies do 3 times the damage and you do a quarter damage, which means that it makes no sense to trade hits with them. You are going to get hit sometimes, right, eventually, but your strategy should be bait the enemy's attack and attack them back. This is totally doable because you're fighting an AI, you're not fighting a human. Their strength is the fact that they do more damage and their numbers. Your strength is movement, is hotkeys, right? Is outmaneuvering them on the battlefield. This is the way you want to be thinking. Now, I would like to touch on something that I'm just gonna call like sprinting attack. This can look a little bit similar to a perk that you can get in the one-handed and two-handed skill tree, but it's not exactly the same. You just sprint at the enemy and you attack. You pre-attack before you get within their range, so that as soon as you get within their range, your attack lands, right? Again, using the enemy's AI against them. Because the enemy has a certain distance where they will not trigger an attack on you until you get within that distance. When you sprint and you attack, you don't allow the enemy enough time for their AI essentially to react to the fact that you've gotten within their distance. You sprint and then you attack as you're getting in to their aggro distance, if that makes sense. Now, like I mentioned in the previous video, switching away from your weapons and switching to your healing spells, I'm going to be honest with you right now, healing spells are insanely strong. Most characters in Skyrim, most players in Skyrim do use healing spells, but they don't really use them very efficiently. If you put 2 perk points into restoration, you can double the effectiveness of your healing spells. Let me repeat that. If you put 2 perk points into restoration, you can double the effectiveness of your healing spell. I don't think there's any other skill tree where you can do this in. Whenever you put points into one-handed, two-handed, heavy armor, they go up by like 20%, then 40%, then 60%, right? With healing spells, the first point makes it 50% stronger, and then the second perk that you can use makes it 50% stronger again. So you essentially double the effectiveness of your healing spells. In combat, if you're playing solo, if you're playing on higher difficulties, your primary skills should be one-handed or two-handed, heavy armor or light armor, and then your healing spell. So you want to get really good and really comfortable with switching from your weapons to your healing spells. While I'm on the topic of healing, you want to get fast healing as quickly as possible, level 25, because this is gonna reduce the amount of time that you don't have your weapons in your hand to defend yourself. When you're starting off fighting against enemies, I would recommend fighting Draugrs. Draugrs have a lot more of a predictable movement pattern as opposed to human enemies, and they can also not perform the instant kill animation. However, one thing you need to keep in mind about Draugrs is that no matter what weapon they have in their hand, they always attack at the same speed. So they could have a sword in their hand or a mace in their hand. Both the weapons attack at the same speed. They could have a greatsword or a warhammer. Both of them attack at the same speed. So you gotta be careful if you're fighting warhammers or swords. So yeah, thank you for watching. That was it. Hopefully you enjoyed. In the next video, we're gonna be covering levels, what you should level up, the perks and such. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.